All right, welcome to the latest episode of Five on the Floor on the Five Reasons Sports Network and the Five Reasons YouTube channel. Thanks for following us. Make sure you hit like, subscribe on Five Reasons Sports YouTube. Also turn the notifications on. You can also find us always on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, and Red Circle. Check us out too at fivereasonsports.com. Unlike the other websites, we do not have a paywall. And check out the great sponsors of the Five Reasons Sports Network, including our guy Arash. He's based in Sunrise. We know that mortgage demand is starting to come up a little bit. Reach out to Arash at 954-651-2057. That's 954-651-2057 or mortgagebyarash.com. He'll get you the most competitive rates, credit scores from 620 and up, and all of the competitive programs. He can offer them to you, again, at mortgagebyarash.com. Give you the phone number one more time, 954-651-2057. Do business with fellow Heat fans. That's what we always tell you. Those are our sponsors. Arash is a great guy, and he can help you get the best possible deal on a mortgage and get it done quickly. And now, today's episode.
Down the Biscayne. Yikes. Five on the floor. Ride for my dogs. Where here's the thing. You can check the score. Hustle hard, couple scars. Wearing bubble frogs. Just like Butler said, you in trouble, y'all. Kept the floor playing. Got it all banned. Y'all seen the block. Stop with one hand. And Pat we trust. It's power, have the guts. We're here to bring the heat. Y'all can hang it up.
Welcome to Five on the Floor, a daily insider show on the Miami Heat and the NBA, featuring Ethan Skolnick, Greg Sylvander, and Alex Toledo, plus others from the Five Reasons Sports Network.
Always want to shout out Mercy on the theme song. We may have an update on that soon. We'll see. Might need to add another name. All right, today's floor plan. I'm Ethan Skolnick. You can follow me at Ethan J. Skolnick and at Five Reasons Sports. We got Alex Toledo. You can follow him at Tropical Blanket. And today, Sean Rochester. You hear him on Five on the Floor frequently. You can find him at S. Rochester NBA. What we're going to do today is this, and please don't take this as they're definitely getting Dame, because nobody knows who's definitely doing what. I got one report here that I was assured of something, and I want to clarify something before we go forward, because someone questioned me about this on Twitter. I tweeted today that the Miami Heat have assured me, okay, I can tell you, it's from inside the organization. I'm not going to give away the exact source, but it's from someone who would know and has the authority to say that they are not planning. They have no intention. That's the wording I was using. We have no intention of waiving and stretching Kyle Lowry. Okay, so that's what I'm reporting. That's what they're telling me. If that ends up happening, then someone lied to me, but I don't believe that's what actually occurred here. That is different than when we report something like the Heat are feeling good about their pursuit of Bradley Beal or Dame Lillard, because there are counterparties involved in that. Like, things could fall apart. There's the player, obviously with no trade clause in Beal's case, or Lillard, who has some say in what he does going forward, even without the no trade, or the other teams that are involved, say, Washington or Portland or other teams that they may be dealing with. So I just want to clarify, when we report something that's coming from somewhere, and we're saying it's, and I said this on Twitter, it's like this, like me saying, I think that my daughter's going to like the chocolate ice cream I gave her. I can't control what she thinks. I can't control what happens once I give it to her. That's different from me saying I'm giving her chocolate ice cream or I'm not giving her chocolate ice cream. Do we understand the difference? All right, let's go forward here. What we're going to do is, if the Miami Heat made a trade for Dame Lillard and they had to give up a ton of assets to do it, how would they cheaply fill out the roster? Because they're going to need to do that. So we have a list here of potential players that they may look at if this goes forward. And this list is going to increase daily because there are teams that are not picking up the options on certain players. There are players who are not picking up their own options, although most likely they would pick up their own option if it's going to turn out that they're going to end up being a minimum guy, which is where the Heat are going to need to go. So, Sean, let's go through some of the guys on your list. Alex, we're going to go through this together and see who may be a fit if this ends up happening.
Before we start, are we providing any framework of what are we sending out? Like what's the package going to Portland for Dame?
Okay, so let's take a look at it now. Let's assume, and again, this assumptions only, not for aggregation. Let's assume that Kyle Lowry is gone. Okay, not waived and stretched, but he's gone to make a deal work. Let's assume that Tyler Hero has been traded, most likely to a third team, because the reports are that Portland isn't all that interested. Not a slight on Tyler. They got a lot of guards. Okay, so let's say he's in San Antonio, Utah, New Orleans, some other place. Okay, let's also assume that Max Strus is gone. Not in trade, but because he has a healthy market for him. Let's assume that they find a way to bring Gabe Vincent back. Okay, that's no certainty whatsoever. But let's assume that Gabe is coming back in a deal because that tweaks things in terms of what position that they may look at. Let's assume that they trade Jovic as part of the package, but they keep Jaime Jaquez out of the deal. The tough one is Caleb Martin. Are we including him or not?
Hey man, it's your show.
All right, let's do it both ways. Okay, let's go with there's 3 different ways. We can do it with Caleb and Gabe, still with the Heat. We could do it with one of the two with the Heat and swap it again, assuming that Max is likely gone. Okay, so let's start with the premise of they had to include Jovic. They're re-signing Gabe Vincent, and they had to include Caleb. In addition to Hero, Lowry, and Robinson.
So Duncan's still here.
What are we doing with Duncan? Well,
I mean, I guess I should. Let's say why I'm asking this. So, like the Caleb thing, it obviously plugs a hole somewhere, probably in your starting lineup to protect having a defender out there, or he's your 6th man. If you still have Duncan, you probably slot him in, maybe as a starter, but he definitely provides shooting. If you lose Duncan and Max, now you have to find shooters for sure. So,
all right. So let's
obviously,
say Duncan is back, and let's say they don't end up having to take Nurkic back in the deal, because that's another variable of this. Okay, so Caleb is
next
gone.
Question. All right,
Caleb is gone. Duncan is back. Gabe is back. Max is gone. Jovic is gone. Jaquez is here. Highsmith is here.
all right. I have a list of too many people, but I'm going to throw this name out there. A veteran guy that, you're looking for guys that can play minutes and with experience. What about like a Joe Ingles? Old guy, obviously, at the tail end, but a guy that can go out. I think you can trust him. He's not as good defensively as he once was, but I think he could be a guy that fits in maybe as an off-the-bench 3 and provides kind of that toughness that the Heat like.
All right, so I'll go to Alex on this next. So as we go through some of these names, then we'll go back the other direction. First thing, how did we think that Joe played last season when he did get back in from injury with Milwaukee? And 2, do you think he's a guy who actually could be had for the minimum?
I mean, he should be somebody who could be had for the minimum. I think he's kind of past his starter days. That's obvious to anybody who's watched him. I wouldn't be against him at the minimum. I just think at that point he would maybe at best be a back end rotation player for you, but I don't know if that's what you would be looking for if Caleb is gone. Mm-hmm. So I think, at that point, if Caleb is gone, there's even more pressure to acquire more front court talent that you can plug a hole into there. But yeah, I've got a list of names too. I guess.
Well, give us one. Let's go back and forth. So give us a front court name in this scenario. Caleb is gone. Vincent is back. Mm-hmm. Robinson is back. Strus is gone. Jovic is gone.
Not a sexy one, but O'Shea Brissett from the Pacers. I believe he's an unrestricted free agent. I'm not sure what they're going to do with him. For all I know, they're just going to bring him back. He hasn't shown that much, but he's kind of he's a wing-sized player, and he's pretty young still. I think he can be kind of in that mold of a 4 that you can maybe plug into your system, and maybe you can turn him into something there. Kind of like what they did with Caleb Martin.
Thoughts on him, Sean, and then your next name.
No, I like that. I think, if you're looking at Caleb being gone, you're trying to find a guy that can replicate that, kind of an athletic, multi-positional player that can defend multiple positions, can shoot it a little bit. Yeah, I think he would be a good one. I'm trying to pull up Spotrac to see if what his status is, but a name that is similar to that and a familiar name, I don't know if he would fit into this price range, but maybe Derek Jones Jr. reunion. Does he fit into that minimum potential guy?
Let's go through all 3 of those guys at once. Derek Jones Jr., Josh Richardson, and although we hear from Sean Highkin he's dealing with a serious ankle injury, Justice Winslow. Alex.
They were on my list too.
Would any of them make sense in this scenario?
Yeah, I think the first one that stands out is Josh, especially if you can get him at the minimum. But I think that's where the concern is that he'll be available to be had there. I think he was making like 10 mil this year, if I remember correctly. I'm not sure if he would already be settling for that, because I still think, he should be, his valuation should be a little bit higher than that. I think it's a little too early for that. But hey, if you can do it, absolutely. And the Derek and Justice stuff would mostly just be for fun, right? Like, bring back some guys you had before. Derek, still a really fun dunker. The Justice stuff, I'm not sure about. Me, I would love to bring him back, but it's like, if that ankle is as messed up as Sean Hyken told us, then that obviously changes things a little bit. You don't know when he's going to be able to play. I don't know. It kind of depends on his status. I wouldn't hate it. It's just like somebody on the roster, not relying on him, or he's a for sure rotation player. I think, giving him that chance to come back would be kind of cool, given the way it ended. But another name that kind of came up today, by the way, this doesn't, figure into the category of former Heat players, although I do have another one here on my list. But one that came up today in Jake Fisher's article that, some of his sources told him the Heat might be after on their radar was Christian Wood. And that's somebody that's come up in relation to the Heat again. He is an unrestricted free agent. I'm not sure if he can be had at the minimum either, but I thought that would be kind of an interesting one.
Yeah, my question on him, look, obviously the offensive talent is there. The Heat have had significant interest at a much higher price point before. But I just wonder if his issues with Kidd and the defensive stuff in Dallas lower his value enough that the Heat could jump in there, or if they lower his value so much that the Heat don't want to touch him anymore. Because, he literally could not function in their system. Like, they spent money on him. They couldn't play him with Luka. I know that Dallas reporters and media were screaming for him to play more, but it was one of those situations we have in Miami a lot where there's a guy everybody wants to play more, but he doesn't fit into Spo, Yurt, Beasley, etc. Reminds me a little bit of that stuff where it's like, does Spo want to deal with the kind of headaches there, even though there is offensive talent? I still think a team is going to give him he could be a rehabilitation project for a team, but I still think probably be a little bit more than the minimum. There are a couple other names on your list, Alex, so let me throw them at Sean here, the veteran guys. Okay, so we saw today Taurean Prince, his option was declined, so he's available. Jay Crowder, who had a miserable experience in both Phoenix and Milwaukee last year, but obviously has history with the Heat. And Jeff Green, who the Heat have made overtures to many times over the years, and we're actually pretty close on a couple of years ago.
Called Kyle Lowry his good friend. Said, had him as a mentor.
I don't know if that matters, but
and lives in Miami, of course.
But they ended up going with PJ Tucker a couple of years ago. But Green was somebody that they talked to, and he does live in Miami. Yeah, he lives in Miami, and he did play a role as an eighth man on a seventh or eighth man, depending on the night, on a Denver team. Of those three, Prince, Crowder, Green, Sean, do you think any of them could be had for the minimum, and would you bite on any of them?
I think yes. I think these are guys that you come back to unless they rush into a situation they like. You come back and circle back in like August, September. It's a late signing, right? Of those, Prince just had the news coming out today. I think he may be the best of the group. Him or Jeff Green. I don't want Jay Crowder back. I just don't think he has. I don't think he has much left in the tank anymore. And that's the risk. Well, that's true too. And I've been typing a lot on Twitter in capital letters when I get my sarcasm out. But look, it's when you're looking at those older guys. Like I had Danny Green on my list. I had Will Barton is up in age too. Like the guys, like you're looking at 1 year, and that's it. Like Danny Green is. He's like my age. Like he can't keep playing in the NBA very much longer. So I think you're looking at those guys to fill a gap for 1 year if you can't find better options.
All right. After the break, we're going to get into a little bit of a different variation here if Caleb is back. Okay. But I want to mention one more name here before we go, because it's not on Alex's list. We're going to get to the rest of Alex's list after. Would you bring back Goran Dragic? Both of you?
Absolutely. If you can have him for the minimum, get those vibes good. Man, hey, Kevin Love and all that stuff about how much vibes matter in their locker room and all that. Have Kevin Love and Goran in there. Maybe that'll help you out there. Not necessarily to play though.
But there's two things here. There is legitimacy to that because you don't have UD in the locker room next year. So and we don't know about Love yet. That's another name we haven't really talked about. Like they can give Love the raise, but is it under $4 million? But is it worth it with what it's going to cost against the luxury tax to do it? But if you don't have either of them and you don't have Kyle, then you need some kind of a veteran voice in the locker room. And Goran is a guy, obviously, that Jimmy would gravitate to immediately. And the guy he stayed in touch with the most was UD. So that's, that does make sense. I guess that is the question, though, before we go to break here. Can he play anymore? It's not really clear, right? Like, he didn't really get a chance in Milwaukee.
Well, there is a scenario where he might be able to play, right? If Kyle is traded, no, because if you bring Dame on and Dame is back, then there's no scenario. But let's say in a non-Dame scenario, I know that's not what we're doing here. In a non-Dame scenario, if they move Kyle, bring back Gabe, there might be spots there at backup point guard. Now, I don't know if he would be in there consistently, but you could come up with a pretty palatable scenario where Goran could play.
What do you think, Sean?
I agree with what you guys just said. If Dame is here and you have Gabe back, I would rather have, and I'll have him there for the vibes and everything, but I'd rather have a third point guard like a Bouye, somebody that you're developing in the pipeline, and he's there in that UD role. If Dame is not here, Gabe's your starter, I guess you could trust him for around, 12, 14 minutes? Is that like he's playing 30?
He told me last year when he was in with Chicago that he thinks he can play another 3 years at about 16 to 20 minutes a night. I mean, he's not irrational. You know what I'm saying? Like, Goran's never been irrational. No. He knows where he is in his career and what he can provide. And I just wonder, you're on a West Coast swing and you need, 8 minutes from somebody to kind of, Goran had that knack whenever the team was kind of down of picking them up a little bit. And I could see that. The defense is the concern here. Like, you can't keep him out there very long. I mean, already was declining. I can't imagine where it is 2 years later. That would be the challenge here. All right, we got some more names to get to, and I want to get to the non-Gabe scenario in a second because that matters. And also maybe the Jovic here scenario. So we'll touch on those in a second. We do want to mention another great sponsor, Ocean's Finest, oceansfinest.com. If you want to get the same premium seafood that's delivered to the cruise industries that's used at the 5-star restaurants in South Florida, more than 40 years in business, reach out to oceansfinest.com. Wow, look at that. If you're on YouTube right now, go to Ocean's Finest. I don't think they were using Ocean's Finest. You can get the lobster, the mahi-mahi, the crab, all that stuff. It was just delivered to my door a few days ago. Our guy, Alfredo Arteaga, for 3 yards per carry, made the mahi-mahi fingers. And they got a great deal right now, and you can get it in time for 4th of July. That's why we put them on this episode. We want to give you time. $10 off this week only with the promo code Ocean's Finest Seafood. No apostrophe. Ocean's Finest Seafood. Order now from oceansfinest.com, and you will get it in time for the 4th of July. Again, provided that you're listening to this episode on Wednesday or Thursday. We're recording this on a Wednesday. So check them out at oceansfinest.com. We also want to mention, as always, our betting partner, it's Better Edge. Use the code 5RSN at betteredge.com. That's with an O. You bet against others who use it, not against the app. That's why it's legal in the state of Florida and 43 other states. And also Prize Picks, our fantasy partner. Use the code 5 there. Get that initial deposit matched up to $100. The NFL futures are up. Get on there before everybody sees how good the Dolphins look in training camp and get in on the props on Tua, Tyreek Hill, and the rest. We'll see if there's a Dalvin Cook prop up there in about a week. It seems to be looking that direction. All right, let's get to we have other names here, okay? So let's mention a couple of the other front court names before we get to kind of the if Gabe is gone, Caleb's here scenario. Alex, JaMychal Green, you mentioned here. That's a guy that I know that the Heat have been in on a few times. And Trey Lyles, a Kentucky guy.
I'd be able to throw a Dario Saric into that category too.
And Dario Saric, who there's been some interest in the past also. He's had a lot of injuries, obviously. Hasn't played all that much the past couple of years. Although ostensibly he's a better shooter than the other two, but I don't think we've seen it in the past couple of seasons. Saric, Green, Lyles. Each of you, which would be your choice?
I would probably say Trey Lyles of those three. I believe he's the youngest one. JaMychal looks like he may be over the hill a little bit, and that's why he's available at the minimum. Whereas, Lyles has kind of been a part of a rotation pretty recently. I believe he was a part of the Kings rotation there.
He was.
So,
he was their first big off the bench, wasn't he? Pretty
Yeah, that's
sure.
why I don't know if he will be available at the minimum. But if he is, the Kentucky connection is there. Was he on the same team as Bam? Do I have that right? I think he was on the Cat team the year before.
He was, yeah, I think so. He was on the Booker team.
Yeah, exactly. So no, he didn't play with Bam. He was the year after, but the Kentucky connection nonetheless. I would probably take Trey Lyles over Saric and Green.
Same.
But they could all shoot it a little bit,
Sean, any of those three interest you?
I would say I agree with what you said about Lyles. He was on my list. All three of these guys were on my list. I'll pitch out Dario Saric. I think there was a lot of buzz in Phoenix before, obviously, he came back from injury that he was going to step in and maybe have a role with that team. Obviously, there was a lot of shakeups. He ended up going to Oklahoma City, right? Is where he ended up?
Yeah, I think so.
And Saric is only 29. It seems like, I feel like he was on that Philly team that beat us up in the – right? Isn't that crazy? I just Googled that because I was like, I wonder how old he is. I thought like 33, but no, he's 29. So, he was coming back from injury. Maybe he's worth a flyer, and I think he provides, kind of what we're looking for. But again, it's that list of guys that's like Frank Kaminsky, Gorgie Dang. Like, come on. This is recycled trash. We don't need that stuff.
I don't know.
I think Lyles might be above that.
He is.
Definitely.
He's playing on a home court team in the playoffs. He's shown a little something. He gets into it a little bit too. We had a couple of confrontations on the court. Like he has some of that fire. I think that they would like. To me, he could do some of the things that Markieff Morris was supposed to do for them a couple of years ago. So they like that style of player. All right, let's flip it here real quick. I know Alex has some other names, but I feel like some of these names may fit better into when we talk about it this way. So let's say Gabe and Strus are both gone, okay? And Hero is gone. And Oladipo is either flipped or is not ready to start the season. And maybe even Caleb is here. Maybe they're able to retain either Caleb or Jovic or both, or I think that's unlikely, but we'll see. Then they have to pivot backcourt a little bit more, don't they? Is there anybody? Most of the names we're mentioning here are – they're kind of 3-4s, that fit into that, this three, Spo trying to get Trevor Ariza minutes out of them. That's what it feels like. Is there anybody that they could stick in a backcourt as a fourth guard?
Well, no? I'll tee it up for Alex because I know that he has him on his list. Dennis Smith Jr. is a name that keeps popping up. So I'll let Alex talk about him because I think that's a great fit.
With Bam. Yeah. Yep. The connection with Bam is there. I believe they played on the same high school team together. Are they both from North Carolina? I don't know if I have that right, but I know they're good friends. Can report that I saw him working out at the UM practice court a couple of weeks ago during the finals because that's the spy report. I guess you can throw in the imaging here, but him and Corey Joseph were there. Bismack Biyombo were there, so all those guys working out at UM. It's just a lot of NBA players. Are here in Miami during the offseason. But no, I think Dennis Smith showed last season for the Hornets with and without LaMelo playing that he still got something left in the tank. Again, none of these guys that we're talking about today are going to change your world, but he is somebody that you can fill out a roster with. And I think there was questions about whether he was going to kind of remain in the NBA about a year ago, and he really showed out for the Hornets. He's always been somebody who's really athletic. I think his shot has improved, and I really think the defense has improved. Like he's somebody who has turned himself into a hound on defense, and I just like the energy that he plays with. The problem is the shot is just not very consistent yet. Like I don't think it's a thing of he can't shoot. It's just like it's up and down. So that's where the concern would be. But if you're just kind of looking to bring on somebody who's still a little bit younger, he's only 25 years old. Dennis Smith Jr. is only 25 years old.
Top 5 pick, right? We're talking about it. He does have a lot of the mental makeup, I think, that the Heat would like and feel like they can mold him. Like if you're going to take a chance, the other guy here that was mentioned, and Heat fans wanted him last year. He went to New York. Tibbs wouldn't play him. Was traded to Portland. Didn't really play there. Is Cam Reddish done as a prospect at this point, Sean, or would you take a look here at the minimum?
At the minimum, I think you take that gamble. I don't think you sign him necessarily expecting him to be your sixth man, but again, you're investing in talent. And just like we just talked about with Dennis Smith Jr., like lotto talent that you can mine, I'm taking that over guys that are maybe in the undrafted pack, that we can find maybe a little bit more easily. But those guys aren't just out there walking around. Those are the type of lotto talents that are still 25, 26, 27 years old. So
What if I
think
told
that's
you
a great
Cam Reddish is 23?
Well, he was also the top recruited guy in that class, wasn't? Well, not ahead of Zion, I guess. But who was the? He was ahead of Barrett initially in terms of Duke's recruits. Barrett kind of passed him when he was at Duke. They said no more Duke guys, but I don't think it applies to guys on the minimum who were former lottery picks. So I think they would look at him. I just don't really know what the issue is there because, I mean, Tibbs was never on the same page as the New York front office with that one, and he just refused to play him. And so I don't know what was going on in practice. I would look at DSJ. You mentioned one more here before we go, and I do want to thank our sponsors, mortgagebyarash.com, Better Edge, Prize Picks, and also Ocean's Finest. Get in on that deal prior to July 4th. Javon Carter has always been interesting to me, mostly because he kills the Heat typically, or did. He had a couple of games with Phoenix. Was in Milwaukee. He screams Heat guy to me, right? Like I feel like that would be, if you're talking about a third to second point guard who's young enough, like that feels like a good option.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the idea.
Javon Carter. Yeah.
Go ahead, Sean. It's my bad.
Go ahead, Alex. No, I was sorry. I was going to say Javon Carter at the front of that 2-2-1 and a future Brady's film breakdown. That's going to be nasty because the way that he pressures the ball, and only having to play a few minutes at a time in spurts, like what Gabe used to do when he was the backup point guard, playing in spurts and really go after people. But yeah, it's a great option. Another name that we should look out for.
All right. So as we said, this is all sort of contingent on them getting Dame. If they don't get Dame and they end up coming back with mostly the same roster, then there may be interest in some of these guys, but maybe not as many because you're going to have more players on the roster itself.
That's the thing. This is a good way to, like, a lot of these guys, like you said, are probably still going to be useful to them in a lot of these different scenarios. Of course, it depends who's back, who isn't, but this free agent list, I think, is gonna come in handy to us in a little bit when free agency starts on Friday. Another name, by the way, who's also 23 years old, talking about like investing in a young guy who was a former top pick, Darius Baisley, went from OKC to the Suns. The Suns didn't really use him, even though, you would kind of peg them as a team who would need that type of depth. They didn't really use him. I don't know if they're going to bring him back. Like I said, only 23, so I don't know if he's going to settle for the minimum. But in that kind of category of Dennis Smith Jr. and Cam Reddish, front court help there.
Well, I feel like there's the opportunity for these sort of make-good contracts like Dion Waiters had with the Heat a few years ago. We talk about they don't take a chance on lottery talent. They did in 2016, took a chance on a top 5 pick in Dion Waiters, and whatever happened after they gave him the contract, that 1 year was really good. So, I mean, it was better than they could have expected for $2.7 million. That's, I think, what you're looking for now. And that's where I think Dennis Smith Jr., Baisley, some of those guys fit into it. And I feel like a lot of their agents would say, get me to Miami and let's try to get the make good deal and then see where it goes from there. Because the best case scenario for those guys is a Heat roster that still has its developmental chops, but has roster spots and has actually opportunity to play. And so that's where I feel like there's opportunity. Again, this is assuming no Strus, and it's assuming that a lot of these guys kind of go out. But I think, Alex, you're right. I think there's a couple of these guys they could pick out, even if they don't make a trade here, if as a possible max replacement or others, because it's just looking like with the numbers we're talking about for Max Strus right now, that's not something in the Heat's tax position that they're going to be able to afford. And I think Max realizes that, which is why he said the things he said at the end of the season. All right, thanks to Sean. Thanks to Alex. We'll have more episodes coming up. We're doing a playback Friday for free agency, sometime in the evening, 5, 6 o'clock, something along those lines when free agency officially starts. So find us not on YouTube, but on playback. We'll post it on Off the Floor and on the Twitter feed. Have a good day, everybody.
Thank you for listening to the 5 on the Floor on the 5 Reasons of Sports Network.